Someone, somewhere, in the Lotus boardroom, sat down with a pen, a contract, and what they thought was a genius idea. They were wrong. This is the story of how one clause, just a few words buried in a legal document, almost destroyed an entire Formula One team. Not through negligence, not through a catastrophic crash, but because their own driver was just too good. And the man at the centre of it all, he didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He barely even reacted. Because that's Kimi Räikkönen, and Kimi does not do drama. But before we get into exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes, because trust me, it goes much deeper than you think. If you're new here and you enjoy motorsport stories that actually make you feel something, hit subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and what's coming next is worth staying for. Let's go back to 2012. Kimi had just spent 2 years away from Formula One, rallying, NASCAR, doing whatever Kimi does when he's not in a racing car. Nobody really knew what to expect from his return. Was he still fast? Had the edge gone? Was this just a nostalgia act? Lotus needed a big name to anchor their project. They were ambitious, but they were not rich. They were working with limited resources, a midfield car, and serious financial pressure in the background. So when the opportunity to sign a former world champion came knocking, they got creative with the contract. Here's what they offered. A base salary of 8 million euros per season. Respectable, competitive, fine. But then, the clause, 50,000 euros per point. Every single championship point Kimi scored, Lotus would write a check. Now, here's the thing. Lotus were not stupid people. They had run the numbers. They had looked at their car. They had looked at the competition. Red Bull were dominant. Mercedes were rising. Ferrari were Ferrari. Lotus figured, realistically, Kimi might score a handful of points here and there. Maybe a podium if everything went perfectly. A nice bonus. Affordable. A clever incentive to keep him motivated. Spoiler alert. It did not go as planned. Bahrain 2012, race 4 of the season. Kimi finishes second. The paddock blinks. Interesting. Good result. Maybe the car's better than expected. Then Spain, 5th. Monaco, 3rd. Silverstone, 3rd again. The points keep coming. Quietly. Consistently. Almost without drama. Which, of course, is exactly how Kimi operates. And then comes Abu Dhabi, November the 4th, 2012. An evening race under floodlights. The lights go out and Kimi Räikkönen, quiet, expressionless, ice-cold Kimi Moat, proceeds to dismantle Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel, two of the greatest drivers of their generation. By lap 34, his engineer Simon Rennie gets on the radio. He's watching the data, watching the gaps, watching Alonso closing in behind. And he does what engineers do. He starts talking, giving information, offering guidance.
Just leave me alone, I know what to do.
Kimi's response became one of the most iconic radio messages Formula One has ever produced. 9 words, delivered completely flat, no frustration, no edge, just a world champion in the middle of a Grand Prix, politely but absolutely telling his engineer to be quiet and trust him. And Rennie, wisely, went quiet. 25 points, 1.25 million euros in one night. And the Lotus accountants quietly loosened their collars. But it wasn't just the wins. That's what Lotus hadn't accounted for. It was the relentless, grinding, ice-cold consistency. Race after race after race, Kimi was there, in the points, on the podium, finishing where nobody expected a Lotus to finish. 2012, 207 points, then 2013, another 183. Australia, another win, another 25 points, another 1.25 million euros. By the end of it all, across just 2 seasons, Kimi Räikkönen had scored 390 championship points. Do the maths. 390 points, 50,000 euros each. That is 19.5 million euros in bonus payments alone, on top of his base salary. The clause that was designed to be affordable, the clause that was meant to motivate, had turned into a financial time bomb. And Lotus had been sitting on it for 2 years without fully realizing it had already gone off. Now here's where it gets messy. Because Lotus weren't just struggling to pay Kimi's bonus, they were struggling to pay Kimi full stop. The team had serious cash flow problems. Sponsors were late, bills were piling up, And at the center of it all, there was a world champion who, by the end of 2013, had not been paid a single euro all year. Not a single euro. Kimi's response to this, publicly, was exactly what you'd expect. I came here only because hopefully we found an understanding. If it's not dealt with as it should be, we end up in an unfortunate situation. That is Kimi Räikkönen threatening to boycott races. Calm, measured, almost bored sounding. The man could make a financial crisis sound like a mild inconvenience, and for a moment, it genuinely looked like he might not race. The final 2 rounds of 2013 were hanging in the balance. Would the Iceman park the car and walk away? He didn't. Because somewhere underneath all that ice, Kimi understood that if Lotus collapsed, really collapsed, people would lose their jobs. Mechanics, engineers, ordinary people who had nothing to do with the contract negotiations. And so he kept racing. He kept scoring points. Points that Lotus couldn't afford, for a team that couldn't pay him. It is possibly the most Kimi thing that has ever happened. The story ends, as most Kimi stories do, without a big speech or a tearful farewell. By the end of 2013, with the debt unresolved and the financial situation at Lotus only getting worse, Ferrari came calling. Kimi signed. He left. And Lotus, weighed down by everything that had accumulated, the unpaid bills, the bonus mountain, the instability, began a slow, painful decline that the team would never truly recover from. And somewhere in a boardroom, probably, someone picked up that original contract and stared at the clause, 50,000 euros per point, and thought about how reasonable it had seemed at the time. In Formula One, teams spend hundreds of millions trying to find an edge. They hire the best engineers, build state-of-the-art factories, push every regulation to its absolute limit. Lotus found a different kind of edge. They signed. Kimi Räikkönen on a deal that made perfect sense. As long as he wasn't very good. He was very, very good. And that is Lotus's 20 million euro mistake. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe. There are plenty more stories where this came from. See you in the next one.